All right, so welcome. I'll get started. We got about 45. We got 30 minutes, and there's about 15 minutes for questions. So we have about 45 minutes to go through this discussion. All right, so welcome to Microsoft 365 California 2021, all remote. Okay, unmute again. That's weird. All right, so yeah, thanks to all the sponsors. We have quite a few sponsors here. They're all that make this event possible. So we want to thank those sponsors. Hopefully we'll be back together again soon, and we'll see each other live one day. All right. Oh, probably the space bar. I muted myself. Okay, so here's what we're about to talk about in this session about building Microsoft Teams provisioning process using Power Apps, Power Automate. We're going to dip into a couple different areas like Graph and Azure Active Directory. So quick about me, I'm the collaboration director at Soho Dragon. I'm a SharePoint, or what's called now Microsoft 365 developer. So I develop on basically anything inside the stack, Azure, Teams, SharePoint. I got started with SharePoint way back in I don't know, 2007 or 8 with SharePoint Portal Server, but I was a user prior to that with the 2001 version. So I'm also a Microsoft MVP. I've been 4 times and hopefully will be on my 5th time this July. So I speak at events like SharePoint Saturdays, different user groups, different podcasts or boot camps. I do organize a couple of these things, so I know how hard it is and how much work goes into it. I just helped organize the SharePoint Saturday Philly last year, and that was a virtual event. That was the first virtual event that I had the honor to be one of the organizers for, and I realized how hard it is compared to a live event. So yeah, I'm also SharePoint Saturday organizer for New York and New Jersey. Oh, so by the way, I am from New Jersey. I'm based out of New Jersey. I'm here right now. It's about 6 o'clock, and I do a lot of blogging for just random things. This part of the random things will be one of these. This session will go up on my blog after this. I have some GitHub projects that I contribute to, all little bits and pieces that go into the modern SharePoint. So before we start, I want to see if this is going to work. I put together an audience survey, so I'm going to paste that in the channel, and it's anonymous forms. Just let me know, just if you have 2 seconds, go in there, tell me, like, it just asks what your role is and where you're from and that kind of stuff, like very basic. It's like 3 questions. So if you don't mind, you can answer that, and it gives me a little bit of feedback about who am I talking to, what level of experience that you have, and it's nothing personal in there. It's just all just anonymous, general questions. Okay, so before we start, okay, so I don't even know if anybody can even get to that. Oh, I'm losing my slides. All right, before we start, I'm going to just tell you a little bit about what this session is. This is going to be about a 200 level, and it's going to stretch up to not quite 300 level, but there's going to be some things in here that you might not have heard if you're experienced with just Power Apps or just Power Automate. It'll give you a little bit of insight and some more of the not the low code, but the stretching part of the up into the higher level. It's not coding, but it's not what I would consider no code solution. All right, so ask a question. Oh, you don't have access? Oh, why? Why? Oh, yeah, okay, so that stinks. I literally just made this form before, so I don't know why it's not. Oh, wait. Here we go. Thank you for the feedback already. I have to give you a anonymous link to that. So that was probably the link to the actual form. This will be the link to the open one. So I have a form at the end. I'll make sure that I do the same thing. You might have to remind me. Okay, so ask the questions anytime in chat. I'm keeping an eye on the chat, so I'll be monitoring the chat, and I'll try to stop as applicable and answer the questions as I go. That's why so we don't have to wait till the end. Just put them in there, and then we'll try to get to them as soon as I can. Everything that you're going to see here, it's recorded live right now. I have a consolidated write-up of this on wrong link. Okay. All right. Well, we'll abandon that for now. We can edit it. Okay, don't edit it. I'm not a forms person, so don't Oh, that's the collaborate. All right. There's no way to do this, is there? Yeah. Only people in my Oh, wait. Okay. Here we go. I've deleted those links. Last time, I promise. Yeah, I should have known better to not to do that 15 minutes before the session. All right, give that one a shot and we'll get started here. Okay, so we're going to go through an introduction, talk about some of the parts of the technology that's involved with SharePoint, Power Automate, Azure Active Directory, and MS Graph, and lastly, Power Apps. And we'll cover all these things in this session, and you'll see a lot of things, hopefully learn one or two things. Yeah, thank you. All right, good feedback. We got some at least the form's working, so we got part of the session working here. So why would we provision teams, right? Why would we want to do this? So we would want our users maybe to have a self-service portal where they can go in and they can request the team, and we can have our admins just hit a button and automate the process. We can have the users add in all the information that they need, like maybe justify why they need the team or what the team name's going to be. Maybe they can add members or admins that they want to have in the group or the team. And it's all about control, like from IT side, like controlling the names of the teams that are created, having the correct process in place for approval. And it really simplifies the process. I mean, you can do this a number of different ways. You can slice and dice it however you want. This is just another approach to creating teams programmatically. We can automate, we can standardize the process, and it's just like one less headache. Okay, how are we going to create the teams? We got to make them, we want them all curated the same most of the time. Maybe we have a project site hub, which is the example I'm going to use, where we want all the teams to look a certain way, or we want all the SharePoint sites that come with the teams to have certain features or functionality, where in the bottom here you'll see we can, in our team setup process, we can call an Azure function, and we can use PowerShell PnP for more advanced setup inside SharePoint. All right, so next one, let's see if we got, oh, I got some responses. Cool, we got, it looks like we got a mixed audience here, power users, IT pros. So IT pros win. There's a couple experienced and a couple beginners, mostly beginners, and there's a lot of people. Oh, wow, see, I knew there was more people from around the world than just California, so that's always good to see. That's why these virtual events, you never really, it's not just the local audience, it's the world almost. Okay, so back to the session. Thank you for giving me some feedback there, and it makes me feel like someone's actually on the other end listening. All right. Why are we going to provision teams? So we've seen this before. This is not a new thing. This is just a new technology, right? We've seen SharePoint sprawl, where SharePoint sites got out of control. Everybody wants a SharePoint site back in the day, and now they want a team site. They want these team sites, and we need to control how they're created. It's old wine, new bottle, as someone told me. So again, in the past, what we've done in my organization and for a lot of different clients, we've provisioned SharePoint sites. We've controlled the provisioning process for SharePoint. We still want to do that with SharePoint nowadays, and now we still want to do that with Teams. This is just an approach you can take within your organization with the tools that you already have. So real world scenario, let's bring it to reality, is I've built a couple of these things already where for various different reasons they have different requirements. But one of the scenarios was a project management site. So the company spins up project sites, right, for each of the different projects that they're going to be working on. One is a construction company and one's a consulting company. So they want teams so they can collaborate within these sites. But they also want a portal where they can go and find all the teams or search all the teams. Now that's where SharePoint comes in, because it's a portal where they can go and they can find teams, they can have users request new teams, and they can provision them. So that's sort of the scenario that I'm going with here. That's just one out of probably many different scenarios, but that's what we'll focus on in this session. Right, so again, here's an example of one of the project hub sites that I've worked on. Now, some of these web parts behind the scenes are SharePoint search web parts. They're SharePoint modern search, but as you can see, it's going through the provisioning process, and then you're able to search and find project sites. Now, this is kind of the basis of this talk, but this is a SharePoint framework web part. They wanted all code solution. That's fine, but you can do this with the Power Apps and Flow. So here is our architecture. This is what we're going to be going through. So I'm going to walk you through the process, and then we'll jump into the live demo. So we'll have our users come in. They'll communicate with our SharePoint site, right, to request a team. That information is going to be stored in some sort of data store, which would be a list inside SharePoint. Once it's in this list, the list will trigger off a Power Automate, right? So then the Power Automate has a bunch of connectors and actions that we can use to do things for us, right, and automate our process. So we're going to have a process in here. One, it's going to create a team. We're going to be using preview components to create a team. Next, it's going to call out to the graph, which I don't have the label for these for some reason. Once it calls the graph, we have to authenticate against graph in Power Automate. So that's why this is the more advanced part, which we'll get to at the end. Graph will authenticate and say, okay, yep, this is an approved request, and send it back to Power Automate. Power Automate will then communicate back to the list and write the information back, and the users will get the updated information. They may get an email, they may get a Teams message. It's up to you how you want to communicate it back to them that their team's ready for use. All right. Oh, and the last piece right here. So we don't want people interacting with our SharePoint list directly. There's too many fields in there that we're going to set up that we need as admins to administrate this solution. So we're going to create a Power App, which the users will then use the Power App as a custom form on top of the list. Right. So that's where the Power Apps come in. You could create your own Power App outside of this and have users just go to the Power App. You could do this a couple of different ways. Like I said, this is just one scenario out of like this endless sea of possibilities. So SharePoint, here's why. So these two technology, I combined them because this wasn't really a lot for two slides. So SharePoint and Power Automate. So SharePoint's going to be use our data store, right? We're going to trigger the flow. Already told you that. Users are going to fill in the list form. That's really all we're using SharePoint for. Again, we're going to use SharePoint as the display and the request, the portal for the display and for the request of the sites. Now we're going to customize the SharePoint form. We're going to keep all the list back end. We're just going to hide some fields. Right. So with Power Automate, it can easily customize SharePoint forms, the new form, the view form, and the edit form. Right, so that's easy. It's out of the box. You just have to have I think you don't even know if you really even need a license for that, but you can do that very simply. Click around, and you're done. It allows for fancier form creation. So everybody that customized forms in the past, you would like hack away at your SharePoint forms or do SharePoint Designer. That's no more. You have to use Power Apps in order to customize the default forms for SharePoint. And it's actually not that bad. It's not scary or anything. It takes a little getting used to. There's some things which I'll point out as I go through it. And it's, oh, hey, Joel. Yeah, so I was looking at my presentation in the Teams, so you just popped up. All right, so I can easily hide and show things that we don't want users to touch, right? We don't have to remove them. We're just going to hide them. All right, so with Power Automate, okay, this is the wrong. This should say Power Apps. I was just seeing that Power Automate. This is really the workhorse behind this solution. Now this is the workflow that's going to be used. That's going to create our team site. It's going to handle all the updates back to SharePoint. We can do a bunch of things when it's done. We can shoot an email out to the creator, letting them know that their site's provisioned. We can send them a chat message in Teams. There's a couple different ways that we can do that. And it's very easy if you want to extend it or add stuff. You just click and put in a new step and you're done. So again, no code, don't need to call in a developer for anything with Power Automate. Typically, you can just kind of click and point, and you might need a little bit of help with some of the development bits, but for the most part, you should be able to handle it. And again, the good part about this with Power Apps and Power Automate is there's so much information out there. There's so many resources. There's people building stuff all over with Power Apps and Power Automate. So when you get stuck, it's easy to find things on the internet. You can probably find every scenario possible because there's so much information. There's YouTube videos. There's all kinds of stuff. So it's with no experience, you can do this with just a little bit of effort. All right, I mentioned some of the more advanced pieces like the Azure Active Directory and Microsoft Graph. So as of right now, there's no real Graph connector. Now you communicate with Graph through endpoints, HTTP endpoints, and you have to authenticate to do that. So the reason that we have to pull in Graph is because when we do our flow, we get back our MS Teams ID. And we can't do anything with the Teams ID. We actually, in our list, in our SharePoint site, we want the URL of the team so that we can write that information back to our SharePoint list. That way, if the users go there and they're searching for the sites that they provisioned or other sites like in the project hub, they can just click on the URL and be brought out to the project hub site. Right, this was just a special request, but this is why I have to bring in Graph in this scenario, because I'm querying Graph to get the team URL. Now, in order to use Graph, we have to register an application in Azure Active Directory. Why do we have to do that? Because Graph requires permission to get information out of it. So we have to then create an Azure Active Directory reference and create a client ID in secret and say what level of permissions we're allowing this little endpoint, because you're poking a hole in your environment and you need to allow only the least amount of things that you'd want exposed, given if anybody was able to obtain this client in secret, which in this case, it's going to be stored in the flow, so nobody would see it. Right now, this information is going to be all put in the flow. And again, like I said, there's going to be a lot of like those heavy technical bits. I have probably an hour or so of videos that are going to come out on my blog site. All right, so let's jump into the demo. Okay, so what I showed you earlier was an example of the Project Hub. Also not, okay, so one question is, could you also not add a secret but use a custom connector and access Graph via it? Almost the same code. All right, so with the options in, you could create your own connector, yes, inside Flow. Also, instead of a client ID and secret, you can use a certificate. So you can upload a certificate to Flow, and then if nobody's going to be able to get that. So there's other secure ways to do it. The certificate's more secure than the client ID and secret. But that's a good question. All right, so what I'm showing you right now is the Teams provisioning site that we're basically creating. So I'm not going to go through and type all this in the 30 minutes that I had to do this. So I'm going to walk through every single step and pretend like I'm typing it in, because it does take a little bit longer than 30 minutes to build it out with explanation. If I was just to build it, yes, fine. So what we have here is just a SharePoint site that we created, and we have a backend list called projects. And then what we'll do is we're going to request a team site, and when the team sites are created, we're going to display the projects here. And these are all my project sites that I've tested and created. So let's first we're going to pretend like we're building this from scratch, right? I'm going to go to the gear, and I'm going to click on Site Contents. Now, inside here, we're going to create our list for SharePoint. So we're going to create this projects list. Now, I've already created it, but you would just do this, create a list, put in the name of the list that you want to create, and projects. Inside here, we're going to create a couple fields that we're going to use inside of our flow. Now, as you can see, we have a lot of information here. So we're going to use the title field, and that's going to be the title of our team site when we go to provision it. For a previous example, I had to use a shorter name because some of them had similar titles. They wanted to control the short name. We're not really going to use that here, but You could use a shorter name if you wanted to, instead of something really long in your team name. You can have like an abbreviated name. Right, so I have this field in here as just an example of like 2 different scenarios that could be that you might have. We're going to create another field called members. Members are where we're gonna set this up for people, and we're gonna set this up to allow multiple choices for people, right? And here, when someone goes and creates a new item, they'll put their members in this field. After that, we're going to create another people field with multiple people for admins, right? And we're going to put our admins in this group. Next, we're going to create a Boolean field or yes or no field. We're going to default it to no. And this is going to default to no, active as no, because when our provisioning process is done, we're going to write back that that it's finished. So that's how we'll know it's finished. I'm going to create 2 more fields here, one called project site, and this is going to be a SharePoint hyperlink field. And let me click on edit. So the difference, okay, yep, there we go. So with the project site, this is still using my Power App, so it's not going to be very helpful there. The project site field, since it's a hyperlink, it takes a URL and a description, or a label, basically. So it's 2 things. So, oh no, always turn your phone off. All right, so it takes 2 things here, the description and the URL. And then just for an example, I'm going to write back the site URL in this field. So this is the site URL, but it has the label, and this is the site URL as a text field. One thing to note when you're creating these columns, if you create the columns through here, through this add a column, it will, and you use a space, it doesn't encode it, it just shrinks the name. So short name field will be short name, no space in there, and that's going to become important in the flow when we get to like writing things back. So I'll call that out later. All right, so we're done setting up our list. It's very easy to make a list. I mean, I'm 100% sure everybody here has already done that. So we don't want to spend time me typing things in, just explaining the fields. And the next step in our architecture, right, is to create our Power Automate. So what I'm going to do here is I'm going to click on Automate, go to Power Automate, and I don't click Create a Flow. Usually I just go to See My Flows, because I don't like when it starts with a template. I want to start with a blank one. So I have a number of flows here, but if we're going to go and create our new flow, we would go to New, and we're going to do an automated cloud flow, and we'll just say Test 1. I'm not going to use this one. I don't think it likes that name. Oh, okay. So yeah, so inside here, we're going to use it when an item is created, and we'll create this flow. Right, so now we're at our flow. I'm just going to go back to the one that I already created and walk through that one. Just want to show you that here's what we have inside our flow. So we have a number of steps. Now I'm going to walk through this just like I'm creating it. The first one that we said is when an app is created. We have to enter the site address. Now the site address doesn't always show up in here. When I first created the site, it didn't show up. So I always have to enter a custom value, and then I have to paste in the site URL. And once you do that, you'll have a list of all your available lists in here, and we're going to be using our projects list. So we have a blank site. There's nothing here in advanced options that we need to be aware of for this one. Now we're going to add a connector. I'm going to show you some of an action. I'm going to show you what the actions that we're going to be kind of focusing in on here. These Teams preview actions. Now, there's a number of these things. So the one we're going to use to create our team is going to be called Create a Team, right? But we're also going to be using some things like adding a member to a team, posting a message to a team. So they're all preview, but I've been using them for a while, and they're reliable. They wouldn't. So basically, what they're saying with the preview is it's not production ready. So if you accept that and you're willing to live with that, then it's okay to use these things. So inside our Create a Team, we're going to look at the options here. We're going to click on the first field, and we're going to need to give it a team name. So when we click on the first field, we would get we would get like a button here. If that doesn't show up, say add dynamic content. Now, all this dynamic content is our list item, right? So you can see this step, when an item's created, when an item's created, oops, clicking too fast. When an item's created right here, these are the things that we can select from. Now, these are all of our list fields. So we're seeing everything here. So we're just going to use our title as our list field, and then we're going to click the title as the description. And then we'll go into the next step. For this step, for the action, we're going to use a control, because we have lots of members in our field and we have lots of admins in our field. So we want to do an apply to each. So we'll use an apply to each. Show you that before I'll open this one up, just to speed it along, because I know it could take a while to do this. So we're going to put in our members here in this field. Now this is the list item, members, and it's going to loop over these if there's more than one. We're going to get the output from this step, the team ID, and we're going to use that here. And like I said, the output from the create a team is only the team's ID, so we don't have that URL field. And we're going to add in our members' email. So this is a another field of the members. There's member claim, display name, email picture, etc., etc. We're going to use email, and we're going to use that for both the members and the admins. Now for this one, you'll have to open up the advanced options and show, you'll have to say, do you want them to be an owner? For members, we'll say no, and then for the admins, we will say yes. So we're going to do that for those two. And then I'm going to skip over this stuff for right now. This essentially will create the team for us and add our members. We want to go back and write back to SharePoint. So we'll use an action here called update item. And again, we're just feeding it in the site URL. We know that. We're giving it the list name. We're just mapping fields. So these are required fields. So you need the ID. So essentially, you're getting the ID of the item. We're just giving it back. We're getting the title of the item, we're giving it back, because those are the two required fields. Now, in this step, before I go into the HTTP stuff, in this step, since it's provisioned, I would then mark this active to yes. And this would take care of writing things back to SharePoint. For right now, pretend we don't have the web URL. That's going to be a whole nother thing. But essentially what we do, we want to write back the web URL, and we want to write back this project site. I mentioned before that this was a hyperlink. In Flow, you can't write back this hyperlink field. You have to do what's called, we have to send an HTTP request to SharePoint and write back the field in a special way. So that's why we'll set that aside, and we'll come back to that in about 5 minutes. After the item's updated, we're going to post a message as Flowbot to the user and let them know. We're going to say, and we're getting the person's name from the list item. We know they created the list item. They actually created that thing. So we're going to use their email. We're going to say howdy, and we're going to send them a short little blurb. Here's your new team. We're also going to send them an email. Same thing, created by display hello, and we'll use the person's name. Let you know your list is created. So let's before we'll get into the next part in a couple seconds. Let's just save this and we'll do a test. Well, I'm not going to save it. We'll just hit test. We'll manually trigger. So I'll go to my site, and I can go right to my site. I'm not going to use the Power App yet. Test 1, 2, 3, and I'm not really using the short name in this case, but we'll add some members. Let's see. This is members visitor 1, visitor 2, and then we'll add an admin. We'll add an admin there, and we'll save it. So again, since it's already connected and saved, what's going to happen in the testing? Our flow is now going to be picked up in the running mode, and we're going to be able to watch it provision. And from each step, you can get the output, right? So when an item's created, here's the list name. That's not very helpful for us for this one, but like you said, when the team is created, this is all we're getting back, and you're going to see JSON, the schema, unable to provision resource. Yeah, I probably broke something already. Unable to provision resource. I probably have the same name of the field of the same list already created in another demo. Resource not found. Interesting. That means my resource, my graph endpoint was not found. Let me get out of this. This is why I have multiple copies of this thing. Let me get out of this and click back into my runs. I'll run one more. I'm gonna do something a little bit more unique. U123, U123. We'll save that. We're gonna run this again one more time, but let's just see what's going on here. I got 2 minutes. I could debug this. So if you're not sitting there in test mode in Teams, you could just sit here and wait for it to run. And it will eventually run. There it goes. All right, so it takes a few seconds to kick off. And I just tested the same thing before this demo, so I know it's working. It just, when it's live, that's when stuff goes crazy. All right, yeah, so it went through that time. It was just a weird glitch. All right, so it went through, and yeah, I'm getting alerts, right? I just got an email that my site's ready. I got a chat message here. Your new site's ready for you, right? So a lot of things are coming through. So I know it's working, right? So that's basically, that's the bare minimum part about this whole thing. Now, in order to get the presentation correct, you can see like we just created U2 and it wrote everything back. This one didn't get created, probably because I have a site called test123. So you're going to want to build in some error checking in here. That's, of course, if you're going into production, you're going to, of course, want to have some error checking or some feedback mechanisms when things go wrong. All right, so now I'm going to show you how do we get the web URL back, and that's going to be where we're going to go into Azure portal. So I'm going to type in portal.azure.com. And I'm going to breeze through this because, like I said, I have a video of this, and we have about 12 minutes left, I think. So inside Azure Active Directory, so I'm at my Azure portal, I click on Azure Active Directory. What we're going to do is we're going to create an app registration. Now, again, you're going to need permission to get in here, or you're going to have to ask for this to get created. We're going to do a new registration, and we're going to say Teams demo 111. Basically, leave everything default. And we're going to need a couple things out of here. We're going to need our application ID, which is also known as the client ID. We're going to need our tenant ID here. And we're going to need to create a secret. And we're going to do that here. Create a new secret. Doesn't matter really what you call it, but you want to name it something that, you know, that you're going to want to remember. And right here, it's going to show you the secret, the value. You need to copy this and hold on to that right now. But here's the certificates. If you wanted to create a certificate, you can upload a certificate, and then you can use the certificate in your flow. So once you refresh this page, though, the secret goes away, right? It's still there, but you're not going to be able to get it ever again. So make sure you do this and you copy it down. You could always just create another one, and not a big deal. But I'm just pointing that out so that you don't miss that step. Next would be the API permission. So in here, we're going to see graph. Now we're going to need to add a permission. Otherwise, whenever we request to do something, it's going to say, no, you can't do that. Now here's all of the endpoints here. We're just really focusing on graph. And we're not going to use a delegated because this is based on an application. So runs as a background service. That's basically the one we need. Now you'll see all the parts of Azure, MS Graph. What we need is groups, because a team is a group. So we're going to get groups. We don't want create. We don't want read write. We want the least minimum, the least permissive that we need just to read. So we're going to click on groups, read, and we're going to add this permission. After you add this permission, it'll say not granted. You need to go and grant admin consent, meaning you're allowing this, the admin saying that this is okay, right? Because again, this is poking a little hole. Once if you have this information, you're able to read groups. Now, you're going to want to, like, if you're going into graph land, you're going to want to know about the Graph Explorer. You can log into the Graph Explorer site. It's going to sign me in with my account. And you can go here and test out the endpoint. So I can see the endpoints. Now, here's groups. We could test out this HTTP request before even putting it into our flow. So I could say all the groups I belong to, right? Or all groups in my organization. There was one. Get group properties. That's the one that we're actually going to use. So we're going to pass in our team ID in this one. We're going to use the client secret to authenticate, and we're going to get back some information, right? So that's, I'm just giving you a little more background info on that. And let's hop over here and see how, now with this information, how do we make this request? So we're going to need to make this HTTP request. It's a premium component, premium action. And we're going to say, when we ask for information, we're going to use a GET request, right? There's a number of them. We're going to take the URL that we just showed you in Graph Explorer. And we're going to put that in. We're going to replace that group ID with our new team ID. And then we're going to say, we're going to add this extra little piece at the end. Now that's going to give us just our web URL. And that's what we want. Now, the advanced things here, we're going to need to select our authentication. So you can do a certificate, you can do OAuth. Now there's HTTP requests, so there could be a number of different things. So they might not have authentication on your endpoint, but for Graph, we have to use OAuth. We're going to put in our tenant ID, our audience, our client ID, and our secret. Right. So in our credential type, we're not saying certificate, we're saying secret, and we're putting in our secret. Once we have that, and this request goes through, we're going to get back something along the lines of this, which is a JSON object. That's what we're going to get back. Now, in order to do anything with it, we have to parse it. So parsing is another component. I keep saying component, but action in here. We're going to pump in the body, which is what comes back from the HTTP request, and we're going to give it a schema. So like, what does the data look like when it comes back? And this is the data it looks like when it comes back. And we can get that. We could run this HTTP request once, and we can see what the data comes back, and we just kind of copy it in here. But it basically says what type of information it is. So the web URL piece is going to be of type string. This is a little bit more advanced. Like I said, you can find these things on blogs. They're everywhere out there. Once we do that, we then can use the web URL. So when we update our SharePoint item, we can use this web URL field, and it'll write it back. Now, I don't have a lot more time to go into the SharePoint issue, but SharePoint is the same thing. If we're writing back a hyperlink field, we then need to make an HTTP request. Different endpoint, we don't need to authenticate in SharePoint world, because this connector, because it's specifically a SharePoint connector, it can handle that part for us. We just then need to give it the body of the request, and that's where it's going to be the title and the web URL. So it writes this is cookie cutter. This is how you write back to hyperlink field. So you can see this. There's a bunch of blogs out there on this already, and I go into more detail in the video. So what they're doing in this item here, this update item. Oh, okay, yeah, I'll mention the blog at the very end. I'll put a link up for that. Thanks for the question. So what you're seeing here is essentially an HTTP request. It just has fields. This is more of a raw one. So this kind of, and the only reason we have to use it for the hyperlink field. All right, so I'm done explaining the provisioning process with the flow. Now I'm going to go into Power Apps, which is the last section here. So in order to do the Power App, it's very simple. You would just hit Customize Forms. Now there's not a lot of Power Apps in this. You can do so much more. I'm leaving it very basic, and I'm just going to tell you about what I did in this process. So I'm letting this load. I'm going to walk through the steps in about 2 minutes. And if there are questions, feel free to put them in the channel while this loads. Right, so things I'm going to call out here. When you create your first Power App, you're going to have one screen. You're going to want to duplicate the screens, and you're going to want to name them New, Edit, and View. And why? Because as an admin, you're not going to want your hidden fields. You're going to want the Edit screen, which has all of the fields. Now, one thing I didn't notice is the hyperlink field's all jacked up, but that's fine. I can go back and fix that. Hopefully I can go back and fix that in the Power App. Under which account should you do provisioning? Ideally, you want to have like a service type of an account for your flows. That's one, because you don't really want it running under your user account. So you want some sort of like service level account that you can add the flow to. You also don't want your user leaving your organization and then the flow being abandoned, right? So you want to make sure that you share the flow. You create it as that like service account, and then you can share that flow with other people. So here in our new form, all we've done, pretend like this is a new form. As soon as you create a new form, you get all the fields. So for our new form, all we're doing is we're taking the attachments field and we're looking behind my camera. Over here it says visible, you just turn that off. Site URL, we're turning that off. Project site, we're going to turn that off. And active, we're going to turn that off. And then we're going to save it. And that's all I did in this demo. Now you can make it colorful, you can do all kinds of stuff. The key pieces are the SharePoint integration part, which I go through in a lot more detail in the videos again. Setting up, now there's a couple things that got me on when I was doing this, is this on new. You want to make sure we set the form to the on new, the new item form. On edit, you want to make sure we set it to the edit form. On view, we want to make sure we set it to the view form. And then in each side of one of these, there's a mode, right? So we want to make sure that you set these modes, right? If I do dot, it's edit, new, and view. So I'm just setting that according to the form that I'm in. So I keep the naming the same: new item screen, new item form, new item screen, new item form. All right, and we can, so that's it. Once you have your forms here, it's easy. You just save it. And what happens once you click save, it'll say publish back to SharePoint, publish it back to SharePoint. And within a minute, I mean, I've seen it where, okay, you click new and the list form doesn't come up. You do Control F5 a couple times. Within a minute or two, and you click the new button, you're going to get your Power App. And that's what this is over here. This is no longer the list form. This is our Power App for this. All right, so yes, we're closing at the end of the session. I'm going to do one more thing before we... I'm going to do one more thing before... Okay, here we go. Anyone can respond. Yes, I'm going to share this. I'm going to share one more form. If you don't mind filling that out, that's just some general feedback on, was this useful? Was this helpful at all? Did you like it? Give me some comments. It's anonymous again, and I made sure I put everyone can not edit, contribute. All right, yep, wrap it up. I'm wrapping it up. So on the home page, in the last minute on the home page, we will see our thing here, and we just added a button, which the button just goes to our new list form. So an old SharePoint trick, an old really old SharePoint trick. You can navigate to the new form, and you could put in a question mark source. So you navigate away, and then now when the user's done and they hit save or cancel, this source piece, it will redirect them back to that source piece. So we'll bring them back to the home page, keeping them off the list. I mean, yeah, they can get to the list from see all. We can hide this if we want to do some hack to hide it, but that's it. That's where we're at there. So within the last couple seconds, I want to thank everybody for their time today and their attention. And we are all done. Oh, let's go back to the. So again, real quick, so you can shoot me an email. You can go to my blog. I'm going to be working on just getting those videos up over the weekend. They're all recorded. I just got to get the ums and so's and all that junk out and tighten them up. And connect with me on LinkedIn or Twitter. I'm on Twitter and LinkedIn. I really appreciate the opportunity. Thank you, everybody. Have a great weekend. See you soon.